Bitcoin and energy go together like two peas in a pod.
Everybody knows that, Dad.
Yeah, well, did you know that a 12 gauge shoots very violently?
What's going on, Digital Wildcatters? Welcome to another week of the Oil and Gas Startups Podcast. You may notice my voice sounds a little funny in this episode. We had a party with Combo Curve and Trax and Bison Interest last night, and I lost my voice talking over the DJ. I actually had a DJ and a saxophone player playing together in unison. So
That's
really
pretty awesome.
unique combo, but it was just loud. And so I'm there for 5 hours just screaming my lungs out. But today we got awesome show with Prolytics. We got the founders, Mike and Blake. Guys, thank you for coming in today and doing this show. I'm glad I got the name of the company right. You know, it's spelled Prolytx. Asked Mike, Blake, you weren't in here. I asked Mike, I said, hey, is it Prolytics? Am I pronouncing that properly? And he said, sometimes you get like, Prolytics probably. So
Yep.
Prolytics, what is it? Tell me real quick, like high level.
Well, at a high level, I've been listening to some of these podcasts you got going on, and a lot of that's from the field side, and it's the upstream out there in the wild part of the industry. We're sort of on the other side of that, the major engineering companies, and how that when you build that big facility and it goes back to the owner operator, we fit in right there to make the transition from that major project world into what an owner's trying to do when they run the facility. So we call it engineering IT. It's this middle ground of taking all the technology of the 3D modeling and the databases and everything that drives the project world and transferring that over into running the plant and the digital twin of the plant for the life cycle.
Okay, I'm going to have a lot of questions because I don't come from that world as much. And so just for clarity, are y'all really serving engineering firms, or is it companies that are taking over new assets? You know, who is the end user for
Mostly owner operators.
Okay.
Like Exxon, Chevron.
Okay.
And those type of companies.
Okay.
That's what we're serving. So we do serve a little bit on the engineering side, engineering company side, but 95% of our clients are owners.
Okay. Got
So,
you.
Chemical plants, refineries.
Yeah, let's dive into y'all's backgrounds, because before we get into Prolytics more, I want to understand how y'all got to creating a solution, what the problem was, how y'all saw that problem, what your backgrounds were. Blake, you want to start with your background and what you did up to this point?
So I have a little bit of an awkward, I guess, type of background. I started out as an instrument tech in the field.
Yeah.
Turning wrenches in the plants.
It's not an awkward. I started off as a roughneck on drilling rigs, man. Come on.
Got
into
into control system engineering and instrument engineering and design. So started working at like the engineering type firms.
Yeah.
Did that for a number of years. Got into a group. I worked with Mike for a while at Mustang.
We shared an office. So our introduction was sharing an office.
Like I said, we worked together. Mike's like, yeah, we shared an office.
Worked in that group, global engineering and design systems. Spent some time overseas on a few projects, living over in Asia for a number of years. Mainly
That's pretty
in
cool.
that,
We're at in Asia.
Singapore.
Nice.
So I lived in Singapore for about 3.5, 4 years.
I was always so jealous. People at my company got to go spend time in Singapore, and I never got to go.
Oh, it's a nice place.
Oh, yeah.
Expensive.
Yeah.
Super expensive.
Yeah. We'll have to dive into that a little bit later, but I've heard it's amazing. So
yeah, I over there, what I was mainly doing is exactly what Mike was talking about earlier. I was taking a major capital project that was being completed, and I was integrating all of the data and systems into the owner's environment.
Okay.
And that's kind of where the idea for Prolytics came from.
Okay.
Is I saw that the engineering companies over there, or engineering companies in general, have this knowledge of how to use these type of systems, how to use the data, how to get value out of it. But the owners, once it got turned over to them, they didn't have the resources, they didn't have the knowledge or the experience. And I felt like that they own the data, right? So they should have more control over how it's being produced.
So the owner didn't have the internal knowledge
Yeah.
or resources or maybe even bandwidth
That's
to
right.
really make sense of the
That's
data
right.
that they had. Over here, you had the engineering firms that, they study this stuff day in, day out. They understood it, but the owner's actually the one that owns the data. So there's kind of this
Yep.
mismatch of,
Yeah, when you're in the project, you've got these sophisticated systems to build a major project, database-driven systems. The EPCs were early in adopting those and using them for their workflows so they could generate billion-dollar projects. But then when it got handed over to the operations team, it was more about running the plant. So the digital blueprint, everything that was used to build it, sort of fell in the cracks. It all got transferred into more document-centric type stuff. So you lost the sophistication. And then owners are starting to realize about 10 or 15 years ago, hey, wait a minute. Like, we had millions of dollars worth of knowledge in these smart systems, smart drawings, smart P&ID, smart 3D model, and we're not using it. It's all going into a document control system.
I think I'm starting to see where the problem was. So are you saying that, engineering firms were building these smart models, we can call them digital twins or whatever you want to call them. And then once it was getting transferred over to the owner operator, they're actually getting flattened, just getting
they're
put
like,
into
hey, I don't-
PDF docs or like AutoCAD or whatever.
Give me
it
a bunch
is.
of
And-
Excel, right? And so they're
Yeah.
taking it out of these major SQL and Oracle databases, and they're just dumping it into what we call
PDFs.
dumb files.
Yeah.
And then what happens is you focus on operations for a year or two, right? You get, and then you realize, oh shit, we're not keeping up with we lost the sophistication.
Yeah.
We can't query anything. We've lost what's the master drawing. Do you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
those systems have all those capabilities.
Yeah.
So we're here to bring that intelligence over, bridge the gap between
Yeah.
those two worlds.
Understood. So, these owner operators spend all of this money up front with these engineering firms, and you get all of this information and this data and these models, and then it just kind of goes into this abyss, right? Into this black hole. And then years into the project of operating it, they realize like, hey, we invested and we had all this
We had some
information.
great stuff.
You had a
Where
great
did it go?
You had a great foundation.
There's two problems there, right? So one of those problems is, and it's just the nature of EPCs, right? They're project focused, right? So once they finish a project, they're done. They're gone. They're out the door.
Put it on a
So-
CD
So
or
they
whatever.
throw it over to the owner.
Real quick, let me stop you.
Yeah.
Acronym EPC, what does that stand for?
Engineering Procurement Contract.
Cool.
So once they're done, they're out the door. They're gone, right? And they just throw it over to the owner, and they're like, "Well, here you go. We did it. Plant's built. We're gone."
Yeah.
Right? On to the next one. And then the owner's sitting there like, "Well, I don't know what to do with this."
Yeah.
Right? Like, I got this pile of stuff.
It's funny because you kind of see that across the spectrum in oil and gas. Like I always saw the very old problem in upstream oil and gas where your drilling guys would drill a well and they didn't give two shits about
That's right.
production guys. And so production guys are dealing with problems, years down the road.
Yep.
And there was no communication between drilling, completions, and production. It was one department doing their job, and then they pass
And
it
then they
off
pass
and they move
on.
on to the next thing. And so,
We were on those projects and we were doing the best job we could do. And we thought it was amazing. And when we were done, we handed it over and we were like, dude, we nailed this one. It's unbelievable. But then, like you say, we go to the next project. We don't even know that the receiver of that isn't ready to receive it. Like, it's an unknown problem. It's not like a nefarious situation or anything like, oh, we're trying to win one over.
No, it's not malicious. No,
Yeah.
like you did your job, you knocked it out of the park, and then there's just this gap, right?
That's
that
right.
Doesn't
And you give it to people with different priorities, so they turn their priorities to running the plant, putting the feed through the plant.
Yeah,
And then at some point they're like, wait a minute,
yeah,
where did all that
And-
great stuff go?
yeah.
And so
Can we get it back?
Yeah.
the value there is in, we go in and help those owners utilize that information and actually get value. So set up their systems, utilize the data, integrate it into their workflows, right?
Yeah.
Into their environments for that digital twin effort. The other issue there is there's multiple EPCs, right? So you have like a Worley Parsons and a Fluor and a Bechtel and a KBR. They do it differently. Like each one does it their own kind of way.
Their own process. Yeah.
So like the project I was on over in Singapore, it had 4 different main EPCs, 6 different subcontractors. But the problem there is the data that you're receiving is like different flavor. Like it's the same thing, but it's a different flavor of the same thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so what you want to do is an owner, and what we help them facilitate is, hey, we'll set up those systems, we'll get it integrated into your environment. And then when the next project comes along, those EPCs work in that environment. And so at the end of the project, you get back your flavor.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And your way of doing things, not their way of doing things.
Okay. Yeah. So let's talk about, the Mustangs of the world, the Worley, those types of.
What brought you to Mustang?
Because y'all worked at Mustang, right?
Okay. I wasn't sure
Right?
if you said that.
That's correct.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I thought that was a wild coincidence.
Is that Mustang, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I want to understand those companies a little bit more in what they do, so that I can have greater context to what you guys are actually doing. So a company like Mustang, is it a pure engineering firm that works on, downstream facilities, and, Exxon comes and says, hey, we need to build, this project at a refinery in Mustang. I mean, turnkey does that.
Yeah.
Okay.
It could be upstream or downstream or midstream. I mean, these engineering companies, hey, we've got a well, we've got a new field that we want to produce. So like Mustang did the major offshore platforms, the big BP Thunder Horse and Atlantis, like those big things. And that's from concept all the way to production, right?
Yeah.
Or it could be a new chemical plant or a new, they don't build new refineries anymore. It could be a revamp of a refinery.
Yeah.
But
That's right.
those companies, you're talking about, you've got a civil engineering team that's building the structure. You've got an instrument team that's doing all the low voltage wiring. You've got electrical engineering and design. You've got process engineers. All of that's coming together in these various, like this digital twin, like you said, it all comes together.
Yeah.
And they're just trying to do the best they can. So they set their own standards. They adopt tools that sort of allow them to plug and play people. So you're talking about hundreds of people on a project team, all using, a handful of tools.
Yeah.
They type in all their work. They do all the cool stuff.
Yeah.
And what's happening is they're sort of migrating to the same type of tools. They're either like from a Hexagon software provider or Aviva. There's some of those big names that are out there. So they're using these big tools, but they're using them, they're setting them up differently.
Yeah.
And so even if you're like a Chevron or somebody and you have 5 major projects going on in the world, they're all using the same thing, but they're doing it differently.
Yeah.
So when you get that handover, it doesn't all look the same. It doesn't work the same. And when you try to build a corporate plan around that, you're like, oh man, my analytics aren't quite the same. My digital twins feel different, and I'm losing
value.
Oh, we need to set the tone.
Yeah. So for the EPCs, very complex operations. They have hundreds of engineers, consultants working on a project. They use different softwares, but they all may be using the same the core software across the different EPCs, but different workflows that they're using, and then different outputs. And so if I'm Chevron and this wouldn't happen, but just say that I had 3 EPCs all build me the same exact facility, their output, their deliverable they'll all be in a different format.
That's correct.
Or a different version. And so to y'all's point, if you're an operator and you're working with 5 different EPCs across different types of assets, none of it's standardized. And
That's
so
right.
it becomes a problem from the operator's perspective. Is that
That's right.
a fair
That's right.
assumption?
And the old school solution to that is to start writing standards. Oh, well, let me put it in a document. This is exactly what I want. But you know how well that goes, right? It's like, okay, we tried, but how can you explain everything you want someone to do? It's kind of tricky. So where that's actually moving toward owner operators having a cloud where this work is beginning to be done in those clouds,
Mm.
instead of even allowing this sort of challenge to continue. The future trend is more the owner saying, okay, well, I'm adopting these tools. I'm putting my systems into place, and these major capital projects or these follow-on projects are actually going to be worked in that system. So there is no handover.
Yeah.
It's just
You're saying
from
you're
the
gonna,
beginning.
You're going to build it in our instance, in our cloud, and that
That's
way, there's not even a handover. Essentially, it's just happening in their tech stack to begin with, right?
Exactly.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay. I think I have good clarity now on that. That was awesome. I actually learned a lot right there. So let's talk about Prolytics and how y'all actually fit into that. And so I know high level what the solution is, but let's pretend like I'm an Exxon of the world and I'm building a upstream facility or whatever it is. How does Prolytics fit into that workflow?
Well, we help from all the way from making a plan as to what your goals are, putting that system into place, getting the information, in training people and providing support and kind of coaching. We like to use the word coaching. So, it's not just a 1 or 0 type situation. Yes, no, like there's a level of quality or a variation of quality in terms of how well you make these adoptions, how well you support the use of it throughout. And so we're kind of a coach through that whole process, a consulting coach.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, we have an aspect of our company which is hosting data.
Yeah.
And because in some situations that's the right solution, is to have a third party like us be a host. And then we have some software that we write, and we have some genius work that happens, but it's in some of our niche areas.
Yeah.
And so when there's a need, we can fill it. I mean, you've had recent podcasts, I think like MI4 or DocMo, where they've done a lot of services, but at some point it becomes a product, portions of it, right?
Yeah.
And so for us, we're a combo there too. Like we're still trying to figure out exactly what the right recipe
Well, I mean,
is.
it's funny when you start offering services, you start seeing the problems and the solutions that can be productized, right?
Well,
and
yeah.
develop products around those. So.
And I think one of the guys said services are hard. Like you eat what you kill.
Yeah, they are. Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that's a tough deal. So
Yeah.
if you can package a certain, advantage or solution along the way, that's certainly a benefit. And we've had some success doing that.
Awesome. That's really cool. So are y'all you're based here in offices in Houston, right? Is that
Highway
correct?
6 and I-10.
Okay, cool. You got to live all over the world. In Singapore. Are you from Texas originally?
I am from Texas, Midland.
Okay. You're from Midland?
Mhm.
Oh,
Midland,
cool.
Odessa area.
Yeah, I'm from Midland too. So what school did you go to?
Greenwood.
Yeah. Okay. I went to Lee.
Did you really?
Yeah, I graduated in 2008.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
yeah, that's funny. What about you?
I'm from a little town, Weimar, just about an hour west of here.
Yeah.
And unlike Blake, I went more the traditional route: high school, college, work. That was it. I mean, I in just a little triangle. I went from Weimar up to A&M. Had a great experience there.
I'm assuming you went for engineering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And engineering, mechanical engineering technology. Actually, I saw myself as more of a practical. So that's a degree that's focused on the practical side. Less of the imaginary numbers and type stuff. But and so I went and got an engineering degree there at A&M. Took a job at Mustang Engineering just down the street here.
And then you had to share an office with Blake over here.
Well, so I started as an
Short circuited all
my crazy stuff. That's right. Yeah.
I started as an automation engineer, like PLC programming and control systems.
Yeah.
And I actually went offshore, Gulf
Okay.
of Mexico. Like that was the first thing I dove into, was upstream offshore oil and gas, which is a whole different world.
Yeah.
I mean, that is a wild place. That I didn't know anything about, but seeing it was amazing.
Yeah.
And the autonomousness of those facilities out there. And so I was in automation and controls, but what we were doing was programming the motors and the valves and the transmitters, everything that ran a plant.
Yeah.
The cool part was I had some awesome guys in the office that showed us how to use code to generate our work. So like if you're going to do 1,000 motors, you don't want to literally program them one by one. You'll make mistakes, right? So we would put it all into little Microsoft, Access and a little bit of SQL, and then we'd write code to generate all of the logic and all of the work we were doing. And I was like, well, I enjoy that part more than I enjoy being the programmer in the field. Like the idea of doing the cool efficiency type stuff and working with the data. So my dad was a guy that worked with his hands. He worked in a panel shop, and it still does. And so I always like, I'm a man of the people, right? I'm not going to be a computer guy. Yeah. But I found out that I kind of like being a computer guy.
So. No, I am a computer guy. Had that realization, huh?
Yeah, I had that realization. And so what happened was when the company in 2007-ish, they sent out this message and they're like, hey, we're building this group we call the systems group, engineering design systems. And we're bringing together the wizard from the piping group and the wizard from the electrical group and the wizard from the instrument group. We're going to bring them all together and we'll sit them in a part of the office, and they're all going to learn how to be wizards together. And I was like, damn, I think I fit in that group. That sounds kind of cool. And so I messaged the new manager, and he was like, well, that sounds like a good deal. You could be employee number one of my group. And I was like, deal, I'll do it. So I switched from automation. And the bad thing about being an automation engineer is that you're valuable in the field, right? Like troubleshooting the motor. Yeah. Like starting up a plant. I was like, I got a young family. Yeah. I don't think that me traveling the world, being, an offshore oil rigs, I mean, while the helicopter rides are interesting and everything, that's not my jam forever. Right. Yeah. And so I switched over. That's when we shared an office, worked together for a long time. And then the idea was, Blake kind of traveled the world and actually saw what the owner was experiencing. I was back in the office still doing my thing. Yeah. And then he came back and he said, hey, let's turn this. I think I'm going to turn this into something. And so what we are is that group of wizards that I talked about. It's that group on the street corner. Yeah. Just available for hire. Yeah. You need that coaching, analysis, programming, solution architecture. We do all of that.
I love that. So Blake, you didn't go to college. You just went in the field and worked up.
I went to college and then I left college. Yeah. And then I eventually got an associate's degree.
That's more college than I have.
Yeah. I eventually got an associate's degree in instrumentation. Okay. And then in like 10 years ago now. Oh man. When I went to Singapore, I have to do something. So every year I teach myself to do something different. Like I love that. Welding, robotics, whatever. Yeah. And most of the stuff that I would teach myself is like with my hands. So I work on cars or motorcycles or race cars, whatever. But when I went to Singapore, it's a city, right? Yeah. I mean, I didn't have a garage. I didn't have anything. So it's
a high density city too, I'm sure.
It is super high density. So I went back to school over there.
Oh, cool.
To a school out of the UK, and I got a industrial engineering degree.
Very cool.
I was over there.
Very cool. So, yeah, that's I love hearing that, like continuously learning and evolving. I think it's really important to have intention to learn new things. And people like you and engineers just all together are tinkerers and builders. And so, guy that I got on our team, great guy, John, he's a frac engineer, and he's a computer guy, but he's also been out on frac jobs and just builds shit. And internally, like he built some really cool shit. Like we have Chat GPT integrated into our Slack channel, and so we just talk to Chat. Yeah, and that's just something he just built and coded up as a hobby. So
we're working on some AI stuff right now to help us do some of that data analysis, data integration and migration. Stuff.
I mean, so that's going to be huge for any form of consulting, engineering work. You're seeing it in software development. Yep. Stack Overflow's traffic's down 12% since ChatGPT came out, which is pretty wild because programmers are just going straight to ChatGPT, and you don't have to sift
How
through.
would I write this loop or something?
Yep. And so, pretty wild times to be building because there's so much technology off the shelf that
It's come a long way in the last 6 months or so.
Yeah.
So we've been looking at it for about 2 years, and we tried some stuff out 2 years ago, and it wasn't super great at that time, but we didn't give up, right? So we've been monitoring and looking at it, and I would say in the last like 6 months, it's like advanced significantly.
That's I mean, you look at GPT, I've been following GPT for a while now. And first things I saw were built out on GPT-2 and where we're at from that point. And now we're going with GPT-4.
It's crazy.
But like I was always so into like no code and no code platforms like Bubble. And I've been watching them for years. And then at a certain point, I was like, okay, this technology is good enough now where you can actually use it to build things. So yeah, it's advancing quickly.
It's awesome.
Yeah, you brought up, we've been talking about something too, which is the buzzword has been machine learning and AI. I think you had a podcast about pipeline monitoring or something a few months ago.
Oh yeah.
And they basically called out the whole industry with this, hey, a lot of that's been fluff, right? It's been, we're going to use these words, but there's not anything behind them.
Yeah.
And we've been asking that question too. You see AI, like the Boston Dynamics stuff, and you see the self-driving Teslas, and you're like, oh yeah, that's amazing. But how come our office can't get more value out of all this technology, right? All, organizing files and gathering data. Like, I realize we're doing AI to go to the moon, but can we do AI to like do some spreadsheets?
Oh, there's some very low hanging fruit.
And it's like,
we recorded a whole podcast yesterday with a bunch of mineral funds and Apache, and we're talking about land and the things that people are starting to use GPT for in land. And we're not far away from AI being able to run full chain title on
that's crazy.
Oh, researching land history.
It's crazy. And so, I mean, you get to the point where you're like, okay, hey, we can take all this, the small task, and it makes us as humans more efficient, so we can focus on, the bigger things. And so, going to the moon, self-driving cars, all cool shit. But
how about some spreadsheets? We talked mostly about new engineering earlier, but a lot of what we do is go into a plant that was built 50 years ago, and they're like, hey, we're not new, but we need some of that new stuff. So how do we take our plant, which is sitting here rusting and collecting dust, it's still generating product and revenue, and we still need a twin. So we do a lot of work with companies that are just looking to modernize the data that they've got, not upgrade their actual control systems or their equipment, just modernize their workflows and their systems.
Yeah.
So that's where we're looking at AI too, and trying to use that to build that.
So before we wrap this podcast up, I want to talk about the whole digital twin thing, because that was another kind of like buzzword that it kind of got like buzzword status in the industry, and everyone was talking about digital twins, 2018.
Everybody talks about digital twins.
Yeah, but they're super cool. Like, I mean, if you spend time around AR, VR, it's so funny. We have an Oculus at the house for the kids, and my wife a couple days ago she put it on, and my kid had her playing this zombie game, and all of a sudden she starts screaming and she starts running backwards and runs into a wall. I was like, that's the type of stuff you want to have on video. I didn't have the camera out. But what's cool is, we do lots of large events, and we always plan we have maps on the wall. They're 2D maps, and we're like, okay, here's the layout, and it's cool, but you don't get a full sense of the user experience, like what it feels like to be in that moment. And I just one day I was like, hey, they're making digital twins of like refineries. Why can't we make a digital twin of the venue and start having, elements like, hey, we can put a tent here or a booth here. And so I started talking to some companies that do digital twins, and I mean, they're showing me like, like this one company just took a picture of a triplex pump from like Google Image and reproduced it off that picture. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, this looks just like a triplex pump that I work on out in the field. And so you start to see like, oh, wow, like, there's super cool use cases for this. And if you're managing some, large facility, and just being able to like see like, oh yeah, there's a 4-inch butterfly valve.
That's right.
There. And exactly the specs on the part, the number, you can see what you have. And so the technology is actually amazing. And I imagine going back and like mapping an old refinery has to be extremely cumbersome to do that. But do y'all see, like, is there a lot of action in that space in creating these digital twins or profiles of assets, and are they being utilized pretty widespread, or is it still just kind of buzzword?
Oh no, it's legit, and it's the biggest thing going in the industry right now. But there are multiple flavors of it. So first of all, you went straight to the 3D version.
Yeah.
But there's a 2D element to that, right? I mean, 3D is the Cadillac, because there you feel like a video game, right? So
Yeah.
it's like everybody can relate to that. But you can do it off of 2-dimensional things if you need to. The concept of the digital twin is more than just the 3-dimensional view and walking through it. But when you say get to the specs, you get to the document or the wiring or the thing, you dig into that object and see. So there's multiple levels of it. But you're also looking at, there's the digital twin, which is operating, like what are the pressures and temperatures and flow rates and the maintenance work orders and everything day to day, like what's happening. And then there's the twin that we were talking about earlier, which is what were the schematics and the drawings and the blueprints for this thing.
Yeah.
And both of those guys are getting sort of melded together. And that's where it's got to come. They've got to all come together. Now, It's not an easy task.
Yeah.
But
yeah, much easier. I mean, it makes perfect sense that that's all, one source of truth there, but definitely easier said than done to, I imagine, to get to that point.
Right. Yeah. And there's the real world. Where are my people moving? Where are my alarms? What's happening? And then there's the design world of how do we modify this facility to debottleneck or make it better or things like that.
Yeah.
And both of those are a digital twin. So I think like many of these buzzwords, you can define it in multiple ways. There isn't one answer to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Understood. Yeah, I mean, life's not so simple and binary, right?
Yeah.
As is the case, I learn all the time. So Prolytics, if someone is listening and they want to check you guys out and have a conversation, where can they find y'all on the internet? What's the URL? Can they find you on LinkedIn? Give me all the details.
Absolutely. Website, prolytics.com, PROLYTX.com. LinkedIn. We have a Twitter and Facebook. I don't think we really use those all that much at the moment. We're not sure if they're going to catch on.
So I always tell everyone, I'm like, you don't have to be everything on all platforms. Focus on the one where all your customers are. Twitter's badass though. I always support Twitter. So
yeah. Yeah.
So prolytics.com. We'll drop a URL in the show notes so you can check them out, or look up Mike and Blake on LinkedIn. Reach out to them. I'm sure they'll catch you over there too. So guys, this was super interesting for me. I actually learned a lot about y'all's part of the industry and that world, and just a place that I don't have a ton of exposure to. So that was a great lesson for me, and super excited about what you guys are doing and the solutions that you're building. And so I'm sure y'all probably have a busy week with Nape in town, probably running around talking to a lot of people. I'm going to try to recover and get my voice back, but I got 2 more podcasts today, so I'm going to keep beating me down. But guys, if y'all liked this episode, please share it with a friend. Leave us 5-star reviews on Spotify and Apple, and we will catch y'all on the next episode.